and I want to go ahead and get us started. So if in the chat, if you're comfortable, go ahead and put your name in there and where you're from. And again, I want to welcome everybody and let you know again that this session is being recorded. And my name is Lori Berry, and I will be the moderator for this ADEIL conference session. And before we begin, on behalf of ADEIL, we would like to thank our generous sponsor, Noodle, and our host, Old Dominion University, and we are thankful for the contributions in making this event possible. And we will be randomly selecting winners at each conference session for prizes and swag, and I will announce the winner at the end of the session. And so therefore, before leaving, I'll need to get the winner's name and email address. And thank you for joining us for ChatGPT and other AI in applied international business, friend or foe. And please welcome Susan Luck and Stephanie Swartz.
Well, thank you. I'm Susan Luck, and I teach at Pfeiffer University in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm the chair of the Graduate School of Business. Stephanie?
Yeah, and I'm Stephanie Swartz. I am a professor for business communication, business English at the Mainz University of Applied Sciences in Germany. So just as a sort of understanding what motivated us to do this presentation and the project that we've done is that, of course, with the advent of ChatGPT, we were suddenly confronted with the questions about what kind of skills do our students need? What relevance does this have for higher education? And do we need to change our curriculum? Do we need to change the content and the learning outcomes? So with this in mind, we set off to do this project, which we'd like to present you today.
So what we explored was the way that students' intercultural communication beliefs around acceptable use of AI and AI-generated communication differs between the students based in Germany and the students based in the United States. Exploring how those differences applied to a global workforce affected the students' understanding of generative AI and how the students themselves define their own code of conduct around their use of AI-generated communication.
Okay, so Susan and I, we've known each other quite a bit, and we've done quite a few virtual team projects together. So this time we put together our students. My students were located in Germany. They were business law students in a graduate program, and they worked together with Susan's students at Pfeiffer University in North Carolina. We first introduced the topics, working with AI tools, intercultural competence, and first they worked individually, and then they met together for one session virtually in small groups. And this project was embedded in their syllabi, and they did get credit for it. And yeah, it was part of their course deliverables.
That we also need to mention these were all MBA students and working adults. My students were 10 students, and they were in international communications, business communications class in MBA studies. And we're in the Southeastern United States. Stephanie's had 17 and at a seated business communications course. And she said they were business law in Germany. And they both involved part-time students working full-time in professions. They were in anywhere from law, management, compliance, finance, HR, and the US military.
Okay, so the project was as follows. We gave the students 2 memos. These memos were to be internal communication to employees of a fictional company, and they were meant to communicate the need to comply with data protection concerns at the workplace. They were told that one of the memos was ChatGPT created, and the other memo was supposedly human generated. The truth of the matter was that they were both ChatGPT generated.
So the students also had to discuss which memo they believed was AI generated, which one they thought was more effective and why, and the differences between the views of their American and German teammates. In the reflective paper they were to address, did they view AI generated communication as an effective tool for internal, external corporate communication? And did they discover differences in cultural appropriateness and effectiveness in the use of AI generated communication?
In addition, they also had to list what they felt were the 5 best practices for using AI generated communication in a business context. And of course, explain why they chose those as the 5 best practices. And in addition, they were to talk about or to write about what they discovered working with their international and culturally different teammates, if they had different expectations or had saw any cultural differences whatsoever.
So many of the students we found, we did an initial survey, and we found many of the students already use a form of generative AI in their workplaces, and they had done so before the November 22nd headlines about the impacts of tools such as ChatGPT. Some of the work examples from the United States students were things such as creating detailed positions notes from short dictations, analysis plan for non-classified military maneuvers, creating culturally appropriate lists of frequently asked questions used in recruiting European basketball players for a United States-based university. One of the coaches is in my class. Summarizing many daily financial columns to a short daily brief, and writing HR and customer service guidelines.
The Germans gave the example that they used ChatGPT to conduct initial research. Some of them mentioned translating, because of course, many of them work in international companies. So the language of correspondence is English. So they use that to translate, to write to customers, create slides for presentations. They also used it in terms of corporate housekeeping or to even prepare sample contracts.
In the United States class, the majority of the United States respondents believed that AI would help them communicate effectively and increase productivity, as well as improve the quality of their work. A few of them initially had ethical concerns regarding AI-generated communication. They included the questions of authenticity, including the lack of dependability, as well as students expressing a need for regulation. All but one student believed that their job was not endangered because of generated AI.
So the Germans were similar in their reaction towards using generative AI for communication purposes, but they were rather skeptical, or at least neutral, regarding the statement that AI would improve the quality of their work.
The project ran over a course of 4 weeks. It began, as I said, with a short anonymous survey on the benefits and challenges of AI-generated business communication, whether they are aware of any policies that have already been instituted on AI in their workplace, and as we mentioned, whether they were concerned about job displacement.
So the Germans were in general concerned. They had ethical concerns, more so maybe than their American peers. They were worried about who was accountable for the information that was being communicated. They expressed the need for verification, and of course, who is liable. So if the misinformation is in that communique, who's going to be liable for that misinformation. They were they mentioned as very important individual conscience. They stressed the need for human agency. And they also mentioned the danger of racism. They also believed that AI was unable to account for cultural differences.
For the policies, at the same time, nearly all the respondents confirmed there were few policies instituted at their workplace, or if there were any at all, they were unable to find them. The US-based students recognize the benefits of having policies in the workplace, such as maintaining human agency while keeping AI from overtaking a task, as well as ensuring authenticity. They were less concerned about, as I said, overtaking anything, but more concerned about it actually that the messages came across as genuine.
Right. Also, the German students mentioned, just like the Americans, that they did not, either they did not know or they did not find any AI policies at their workplace. They felt that AI policies would be beneficial, and that especially in terms of handling data privacy, use of confidential information, that was absolutely essential to have these policies. They felt that a framework on how to use it, when to use it, would be important for reducing legal issues and ensuring the safe use of it.
The reflective papers, when we got them, they confirmed the knowledge of how to use generative AI as a necessary tool. That they felt they didn't need to explore possible ways that a workplace could use generative AI because they were already seeing it. But they also seemed to understand that it was a tool to help them be more efficient in their work, not a tool that would replace them by doing all of the work for them.
So we took a look at, because as we initially said, for us it was important, what relevance does AI have for how we're going to teach in the future? What kinds of skills do we need to impart upon our students? And these are professional students. They're working in professional jobs. And so for us, we wanted to evaluate their answers according to a framework. And the one that seemed to be most suitable for our needs was the AI literacy model, which you can find here. Carden et al. Is the challenges and opportunities of AI-assisted writing. And you'll see on the next slide the diamond model that they came up with for AI literacy.
Stephanie, do you want to go on and explain this one?
Yeah, sure. So as you can see here, that there are four aspects around which this, or capabilities concerning AI literacy, according to Carden et al. And they have at the bottom, application and accountability. So those two are the cornerstones of AI literacy. And so we'll go into a little bit more detail about those in a minute. In the middle is agency, because without human agency, without humans determining the use of it, then there would be no possibility for authenticity, which is, of course, then whether the tone is met and whether it appears sincere and credible.
So we felt we wanted to know, as they knew the various AI tools, what were the strengths that the students saw, their weaknesses, the uses, and the capabilities that they saw. For the US students, they found that was very good for drafting basic messages. This was not perhaps a final message, but a draft message, at least to get started. It was a good time-saving tool. And they all felt that it needed human oversight for those basic messages that would be drafted. All of them said they wouldn't send them out like that. They needed to be looked over and corrected, but it was great for drafting. But they also all said they needed training in how to use it. Excuse me.
The Germans agreed. They saw it as a time saver, especially if you think about the language barrier and how long it would take someone, a non-native speaker, to come up with a appropriate and correct sentence or a report. So for them, it was definitely a time saver and helpful. And they saw it as particularly good for just general basic messages and for keeping a uniformity across the board, so that, you know, when the company communicates, that it's, you know, stays basically the same. One of the German students, you know, we took one of the quotes from the German students. He was employed in a large global company where English is the corporate language. And he said that he felt it was important, that that it was an impressive tool which can assist you in getting the right tone in communication, offering you different phrases and variety in how you express yourself, but in a professional way.
Authenticity was from Cardin et al. As focus on genuine communication and prioritizing the human element. And so the question concerning cultural appropriateness in the use of AI-generated communication, including effectiveness in the light of diverse cultural backgrounds, may affect the receiver's perceptions of authenticity. The US students felt that because of that, because you couldn't rely on the AI to understand the differing cultural aspects, that even in something that would go to your own organization, you couldn't rely on how it would, the tone would be sent, that the human was responsible for proofreading and ensuring that the response and culture of the receiver is taken into consideration. They also felt that AI-generated communication should be used only for neutral communication and not for communication where the receiver may have an emotional response to the communication. One of our American students said, and we took these quotes from the papers, there's a definite difference between a neutral message, which can be AI-generated, and the ones that need human touch and connection. Examples are job reviews, performance feedback, or even daily check-ins. These need people connecting with people, even if a machine can be, I can't read the lesson, be part of the task, can spot the task. Yeah.
So the Germans largely agreed with the Americans in terms of maintaining that AI lacks emotional intelligence and empathy, has difficulty with humor, sarcasm, or other cultural cues. And they pointed out the likelihood of misinformation, which might cause confusion and loss of reputation for the company. So this was a quote from a German student. To ensure cultural appropriateness and effectiveness, it's crucial to carefully design and train AI systems with diverse cultural inputs and constantly monitor their performance. Considering cultural context, language nuances, and potential biases, it's important when using AI. Additionally, providing an option for human intervention or escalation should be guaranteed in cases where complex or culturally sensitive issues arise, allowing human expertise to handle the situation appropriately.
One of the areas that we also discussed, we looked at from the AI literacy diamond model, is accountability. Who takes responsibility for the content? And who takes responsibility to ensure a fair and equitable access to the tool? Both classes believe that if the person generated the message should take the responsibility. These people need to use AI wisely, and they have to give oversight to make sure that what the message has been generated is appropriate in tone and nuance. And this one I thought was really interesting, but it's very appropriate to check whether the information is factual and correct, because when the AI doesn't know, it may make something up. Right. One of the US students in the paper said, if the AI says something offensive, that human who used the AI tool is responsible. That's how it is in business with humans. If you employed someone who says offensive things, it's your responsibility to make sure it doesn't happen again. And you should also take some of the blame for not doing due diligence and managing that employee. The AI should be no different.
From a German student perspective, compliance with EU data protection laws means that AI-generated communication involves handling personal and sensitive information appropriately, ensuring data encryption, securing the storage, and controlling the access of data. Furthermore, every user and reader of text generated by AI must be informed that AI was used to create a text or to obtain information. That's something that we've been really having to impress upon our students, that they need to cite it just like they would cite any other source.
Agency is another part of the diamond model. It implies human control over when and how to use AI generative tools for communication, as well as making decisions to implement or discard the suggestions that the AI tool has made. We had similar reactions in both classes. The United States students emphasized the human choice and responsibility, while the German students emphasized the need for human oversight, emotional intelligence, and ethical considerations.
I thought this was very interesting, this quote. Even if AI had been used as a smart translator during our discussion, the result generated by AI would have had to be checked for correctness in order to avoid misunderstandings. This, in turn, would have required the own language skills of those who had used a translation by AI.
Very interesting. The intercultural differences and findings, our goals, we wanted to explore how intercultural communication beliefs around the acceptable use of AI-generated communications differs from different cultures. We also wanted to explore how these differences, as applied to a global workforce, would affect the students' understanding of AI-generated communication. In other words, would it be different working for a workforce or a company that was similar to the teams we designed rather than solely German or solely United States-based corporation. In the United States class, the students in this classroom primarily felt that US students were more open to writing with AI tools. Many of them felt that the fears that their German-based teammates expressed were outdated and unnecessary, although many of them stated they really, really liked the idea of the EU's GDPR. We had one Brazilian student based in the US classroom, and I thought this was a very interesting point. He said that the mere vastness of the United States would make legislations such as the GDPR difficult to implement in the US. He also talked about how from one state to another in the United States, your cultural nuances are very different. And he was probably the most concerned of all of the students about all the intercultural differences and also about the legalities.
Can I stop for a minute with that,
Sure.
Susan?
Sure.
I'd like to just make a comment about that. Maybe people here that do not know what the GDPR is. It's the General Data Protection Regulation that is implemented throughout all of the member states of the European Union. And so maybe the Brazilian didn't realize that this was not just for Germany. And if you think about the enormous diversity of all of the European Union states, and still that regulation is possible. Yeah, maybe something that he hadn't really considered.
I think that you're accurate on that one. So it's very much. So one United States student was surprised that the Germans found the memo that he thought was AI generated to be too cold. He thought that the Germans would like the coldness. He was surprised that they thought it was too cold. He was now unsure whether the advent of AI generated business communication would make his role as the human overseeing that communication harder or easier. Harder because he would have to delve more deeply into cultural nuance than he had been given over the semester of international business nuances, or easier because people may be more forgiving of intercultural mistakes.
So the Germans also confirmed the assessments of the Americans regarding the German hesitancy towards technological change. Germans are notorious for being very slow to change, and the willingness to use these generative AI tools. And they attributed that largely to the government regulation and company oversight regarding private data.
So which memo did they choose and which one did they prefer? Almost all the Germans preferred a direct and precise approach, which they assumed was the ChatGPT generated memo provided. All the United States-based students appeared to overridingly prefer the more personal and less detailed approach offered by what they thought was the human-generated memo. And as you know, Stephanie said, ChatGPT generated both of them. And Stephanie created them, which is so she can talk about how she actually programmed it to get what she wanted. From a student who knew both cultures, Stephanie, I think this was your student. You want to take it?
Yeah, sure. The American students, with regard to their heritage, the South of the US, where Southern hospitality is engraved in their being, would also always prefer a more emotional, personal communication style, whereas the German communication, especially in business and legal contexts, can be much more to the point and unemotional, where delivering the content is much more important than the tone. I think they nailed it on the head.
They did. They did. What about the best practices? I think they worked together. They all came together with some great points. It was important to align AI-generated communications to reflect the differences in cultural norms and language nuances. It was important to monitor generative AI for biases that exist in the AI training data. In other words, AI is only as good as what you program it to be. So were there any biases in the programming? It's important to audit for culturally inappropriate or discriminatory communication, and important to ensure that training data reflects diversity and inclusion.
So what was on every student's best practice list, which goes back to the importance of agency, the center of AI literacy, is the importance of maintaining the human touch. That was emphasized by several students, especially in terms of empathy and emotional intelligence, aspects that business communication require, and qualities which AI systems, at present at least, are struggling to replicate.
Some of the values we found of the project, it helps students to reflect on their own use of AI tools, and as well as the benefits as well as the limitations, something that I don't think they would have done without this project. They also experienced the similarities as well as the differences and the perceptions of their international peers regarding AI. And again, that's a discussion that I don't think would have happened without this project.
Students became more aware of cultural nuances and differences in communication styles. They became more aware of the need to be sensitive to these aspects when interacting in an international business environment, especially in regard to utilizing AI-generated messages.
So even when certain facets of AI literacy, such as application, were present in the students, collaborating in this project helped them develop additional facets, such as an awareness of authenticity, accountability, and agency. So, and that's our presentation. Questions? I need to see if I can pull back up the Zoom. Is anybody, Stephanie, can you see the chat? Are there any questions? Okay.
Yes. I have a question here. How do you believe learning outcomes have changed in light of AI?
Oh, do you want to start with that one or me? I can go and tell you that I know that I've changed, not necessarily my learning outcomes per se, but I've added to them. I think this we've talked about in the particular course, some of our learning outcomes would be the necessities of understanding different audiences' perceptions and needs and cultural communication. I think that by adding AI in there, you really have to add that they're going to have to not only understand the audience's perceptions, but how you are responsible for those audiences' perception. I think that that's even more important. Stephanie, what else would you think?
I think another aspect that's been important for me is I teach business communication also to IT computer scientists, and I've always included some cultural aspects, but I think now when I'm teaching programmers to go out and work, I'm trying to make them more aware of the responsibility they have in the training data, and using their understanding of intercultural competence to incorporate that in how they program.
I think that that is what you're saying, is being more aware of it. It fits not only in programmers, but again, perhaps I have a lot of medical professionals that I work with. It's the same thing, to be much more, even more aware, perhaps, of how, just as we started at talking about how doctor's notes can be taken and generated into a report by AI. One of the students was talking about the doctor's note. The AI took it and said, in other words, death normally occurs within 3 months. And you don't say that, just it was culturally appropriate or not. And it just certain things you had to they have to be more aware of.
Absolutely. So maybe another question. So, any questions from the, how do we make students aware of biases and misinformation when using AI tools? Good question. I mean, I think what I do, for example, is that I have them create texts in using ChatGPT, and then look over them for appropriateness, and and through discussion, and also cross-cultural discussing theories and making them aware of certain guideposts that they can use. It is a difficult topic, and it's something that I know that we professors, especially in cross-cultural management, still haven't figured out completely how you can talk about culture, metaculture, the complexity of culture, but it doesn't mean that it shouldn't be done. And one thing is just to look, to have the students try it, put prompts in, see what comes out, and then look at it from the perspective of cultural appropriateness.
I've had my students take, for instance, how in part of an exam or an assignment. In fact, I'm having them do this in almost all my classes in an assignment. Create their answer the way they would, and then run it through ChatGPT and just say, how would you word this for someone who perhaps grew up in Eastern North Carolina, who has never been out of the southern part of the United States? Or how would you word this for someone who has lived in 5 countries? And what's been very interesting is they'll look at it and they'll say, no, that's not right. No, that's not right. And so that's, it's interesting. It's very interesting. I also had one just for fun. I said, see what sources they will give you. And we found a few that the sources were made up. They couldn't find them. So I think the more you practice, the more you become associated with you. Andrea, go ahead.
Question from Andrea. Do you have any concerns about students losing the skill to express themselves orally if they're more reliant on AI for written communications? I don't know if Andrea, did you mean express themselves orally you mean verbally, like in both ways, that they're not able to communicate, you know, speaking and writing, or that they just rely all the time on written communication and therefore never speak to anyone? I'm not exactly sure.
My thought is, I watch a lot of students texting a lot, and they're so focused on texting, the abbreviations of texting, sometimes that those shortcuts come out in their writing. My concern is we're already having issues with students being able to actually talk to each other and express themselves in a acceptable, respectable manner. The more they are generating written communications with AI, I can, my concern is that it will become even less commonplace for people to actually talk to each other, to express themselves, and even more so to kind of just go to that as their first means of clarification for any type of misconceptions or miscommunication. You know, we used to pick up the phone and call, and I'd call Stephanie, hey, Stephanie, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
Now I pick up the phone and I call Stephanie, and I keep getting, well, you know, if you want to leave a message for Stephanie, press 1, or, you know, whatever the case may be. So I'm just seeing a broader disassociation with the actual person-to-person relationships and communication.
I feel your pain. I see the scenario in front of me where you have a party of 10 people and they're all on their phone sending each other text messages. You know, I think it's a general trend that you're talking about. It's a problem that we're facing in every area. And I think AI could potentially exacerbate it and make it worse. But I still think that maybe communication is changing, the kind of communication is changing, but in the end of the day, human interaction is still so important for us all. And we still, as you saw from what this one student wrote, is that, you know, you can't just simply speak into a translating and the AI translate it and you hand the phone and the other person hears what you're going to say. I mean, you do still need the human being behind the communication. It just may express itself in a different way. I mean, I don't know, Susan, did you have a take on that?
Well, again, I'm right there with you. I feel the pain and I see it. I see that more with my younger students than I do with my older students. So again, I think it's an age generated what you're used to. But when I asked earlier, did it change our learning outcomes? I don't think that it's changed the learning outcomes, but how I achieve the learning outcomes have changed. I am making fewer written assignments that just end with written assignments. They are having to now work, even Stephanie's in my project and the projects before, we've had them in virtual international teams. I am putting them in virtual groups where they have to discuss and get feedback from each other, and they have to record these. So I see what they're doing. I have, instead of using some written check-in assignments, I've been having them actually record themselves talking to me on their phone, and then turning those in. And so that I can look at how they're interacting. I mean, I had one young man who was just so bored. He was lying down on the screen and it was just terrible. You know, and it's like, you know, you didn't pass because would you do this when you're talking to your friend? You know, so I think that it changes in some ways, not the learning outcomes, but how we achieve them. The more we show them how they have to be responsible for the writing, the more we also have to show them they're responsible for actually human to human talking. And I'm finding now my class is all online, but I'm making them do a lot of human interaction. We are an asynchronous program. And I've had a few of them say, this is the first time I've actually ever talked to anybody. It's in one of my classes, and all the rest of their classes are seated classes. So, I'm thinking, yeah, I see you laughing, Andrea. So that's what I'm thinking. It's, we just have to, be a little smarter than they are and figure out what we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So, one more time for one more question, as far as I can see. Don't have to type it. You can just shout it out.
Yeah.
Well, do you incorporate language into the syllabi about using AI? If so, is it to use or not to use, or both? I can say for myself that I do have a AI policy in my LMS. It's published, and I ask my students always to tell me, and to cite it, that what they have handed in has been used, or that they've used AI, ChatGPT or whatever, to produce it. How about you?
I have the same thing. I have we have a department AI use policy. They have to cite it. As I said, many of my assignments, I make them use it, and they have to put that in, not only here's this, here's the raw, what the ChatGPT or AI gave us, here's my takeaway from it, here's the revision. So, it's not that you can't use it. Well, I think Stephanie and I are both saying we need to teach you how to use it, because the horse is long gone in the next field. The barn door has been open. We have to just work with this.
So. Exactly. Yeah, so we hope with this session that we have given you maybe some ideas about how to potentially use AI, how to perhaps encourage or develop AI literacy in your classes, and yeah, just a sort of food for thoughts, by just giving one virtual team project in which we used AI as well. So feel free to reach out to us if you have more questions or you'd like to know more about the project, and we'd be happy to provide you with more information.
Yes. Thank you for coming.
Well, and thank you both, Susan and Stephanie, for your session, and for all of you for attending. I want to share in the chat the link for the conference session, and let you know that this is for the entire conference session. So you might be seeing the same link pop through if you've been in multiple sessions, but this is for the overall conference, in case this is the only session you've come to, or if you want to take it for later, for coming at the end of the day or at the end of the conference. But again, thank you both, Susan and Stephanie, for your presentation. It was really interesting to learn around student use of AI and interpretation. And again, thank you all for joining, and enjoy the rest of the ADEIL conference.